Hello and welcome to episode 114 of Communicast, the podcast dedicated to enhancing communication skills. I'm your host, Scott D'Amico, president of Communispond. Today I'm joined by Dr. Hua Xiang, an applied linguist, educator, and award-winning author who specializes in intercultural communication and language learning. Catherine leads East Asian languages at the London School of Economics and Political Science, serves as the program director for LSE's BSc International Relations and Chinese program, and is the UK director of the Confucius Institute for Business London. In this episode, Catherine and I explore what great communication really looks like in a global environment. We talk about building rapport and managing relationships, why knowing your audience is more than just a best practice, and how cultural differences shape expectations, politeness, and even everyday interactions. Let's dive in. Catherine, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Really looking forward to our conversation. Before we get too far into it, maybe tell the listeners just a little bit about you, your career journey, and the great work that you're doing today.
Oh, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Catherine Xiang. I'm originally from Shanghai, China, but I've been working and living in London for the past 25 years. So I would say I'm a Londoner now. I am a, educator, applied linguist, and award-winning author of the Navigating China series. So I would say I do quite a few different things. In terms of my job title, I look after all the East Asian languages at the London School of Economics and Political Science and program director for our BSc International Relations and Chinese program. But also I'm the UK director of the Confucius Institute for Business London, which is a partnership between LSE and Tsinghua universities. So my journey really started in 2011 when I, came to UK as a international student to pursue my postgraduate study. And then it's a long story since then, and I've been working and living here, as I mentioned.
Oh, that's fascinating. Was there anything in particular that really drew you to, this particular field, really focusing in the language and the linguistics of it?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Actually, my study and my career also sort of take different turns along the way. It's kind of slightly different from a usual kind of from a planning perspective. So actually, I did my undergraduate study in China. At the time, my major was accounting and finance. But I always loved English, and the program itself was a like joint degree actually between Shanghai University and New York University. So language skill and being, be able to use English and learn English is very part of my degree. And as any, students, I wanted some pocket money, so I decided to teach English to kids at the time as a like a part-time side job while I was a student. And I just fall in love with it. My After I graduated, the plan was still, oh, I should do a master's, and my parents were still sort of telling me you should thinking about going to States. That was part of the plan at the time. But then, ironically, I attended international education exhibition in China by UK. And I just discovered at the time that, if I go to UK, I can get a master, just by 1 year rather than spend more time in the States. And then at the time, also, I needed to get GMAT in order to do a postgraduate study in the US while I already have my TOEFL ready for going to the UK. So I think there's a little bit of also logistic, choices and convenience. Then the biggest part is I had to convince my parents. I think this is what I want to do. I love language and I love to, teach language. So that was like the biggest part, but they've been supportive.
Wow, that is so cool and definitely a hard pivot away from accounting and finance
I
into
know.
language and teaching and research and PhD. Absolutely love it. And it's very evident to see that you're very passionate about it. You're really just around language and communication. And as I think about it from a teacher perspective, but just I think more wholly from your career background, your communication is going to play a big part of that. So when you hear that someone is a very strong communicator or somebody has strong communication skills, what's the image that comes to mind for you? What's it conjure up in your mind?
I think communication has multiple functions. That's one of the most important thing come to my mind when you think about what is the role of a good communicator. I think obviously if you're trying to pitch to someone or do a product presentation, then clarity is very, very important. But if I think about everyday conversation, interaction, I think to me, a very good communicator would have to be someone who can manage relationship and build rapport through communication. So that's essential because I think, as human being, to have positive and constructive relationship is so key. And that cannot be done without communication. And a lot of time it's both through language, but also, how you say it, the non-verbal communication is also a huge chunk of that. So I would say a good communicator will definitely be a people person, a really, relationship builder, but through the way he or she communicates.
One of the key things that you hit on there was really around building rapport through communication. And I think in today's workforce, that's a skill that is really important, especially as we are increasingly geographically dispersed. A lot of professionals are either working from home, somewhat in isolation, or they may go to an office but spend a lot of their time on virtual meetings with people all across the country, all across the world. So, really having those skills to be able to use your communication skills, use your language to build rapport, I think is something that's going to be very critical for people that are looking to grow in their career. So as you think about that, this idea of building rapport as being an important skill, but really beyond that, what do you see that's important for people today, to focus on from their communication skills if they want to be successful, whether it is in academia, teaching, research, or just in the business landscape?
I think build on rapport management because it's kind of related. And one of the things we talk about is always like understanding your audiences, right? So who you are talking to, what is their interactional goals? Why would they want to or have the interest to communicate with you? But of course, at the same time, when we go into any conversation or interaction, we have our own interactional goals. Can you align those first? So I think knowing your audience, it's starting with what is the aim, what you try to get out of that communication, or how, to what extent you want to maintain or enhance the relationship. I would say that's the first part. And then there will be the second part is how you communicate your language and how you use your language skill to communicate. There's so many different researchers out there. And I think in the West, there's a lot about clarity and transparency and also politeness play a huge part into this. Make your hearers feel good, do not impose. But I think in order also to be successful, particularly in a global context, when you trying to communicate with people from different cultural backgrounds, and that's where in order to the ability to understand how to navigate differences become very, very important. So usually these kind of differences, tend to be for on our fundamental or decision making logic behind our understanding towards roles and obligations, expectations and assumptions. So these obviously take a bit of time, take a bit of kind of conscious training to understand why and how people from different cultural backgrounds might think and express differently. So I think that would be a big homework, but that would be definitely useful, especially in a global context.
So two or three things that I picked up on there. One, this idea of understand your audience, know your audience, and what ultimately is their goal, right? So not necessarily as much as their background, where they're from, what they're doing, but really what's their goal on it? What's my goal on it? And then how do I understand how can I bring the two of those together? That is a recipe for a great communication because when I can create a aligned goal or a shared goal between the two of us, then all throughout the conversation, I want to try and tie things back to that particular joint goal. So that was one big thing that I heard. Then the second one really was just in general how you are communicating, the skills of it. But the thing that you touched on there at the end that I think really is important, especially as we are communicating globally, is doing the legwork, doing the research to understand if I'm communicating with somebody from a different part of the world, a different culture, maybe they have a different native language. What are some things that I need to be aware of with how I am communicating? Because I might need to change my style or my approach a little bit based on who's on the other side of that conversation.
Definitely, definitely. A lot of times this is also starting very importantly from our attitude. That's always the starting point, right? Are you open-minded? Are you curious? Particularly, everyone's different. We have, like you said, different communication styles. Some person might be very expressive or certain culture, like for example, Italian language and culture, it's been researched. They've been very open. They use a lot of, hand gesture to express their meaning. But there are other language or cultures value modesty and constraint not to show your emotion so much like the East Asian culture. So can you adapt? Can you learn to build that rapport? Yeah.
Yes, as an Italian background, I can attest to
I
the
see.
animated nature of my communications and the gesturing. And so I think at one, as you understand that, it can help you in your conversation that one, is this person really excited? Are they angry? Are they engaged? Or is that part of how they communicate? The flip side of it is, you know what? I met with Catherine today and she just did not seem into the conversation. I couldn't get a good read on her. I don't think that the conversation was going the right direction, but it could be completely opposite of that. That's just kind of how Catherine communicates and the style and the background that she brings to it. So I think doing some due diligence, doing some homework, and as you mentioned, this idea of being open-minded, being curious, and doing the prep work before your engagements.
Yeah, I love what you said about observation, actually. Just, observe the other person. I think that's tied into, I mentioned previously, how important nonverbal communications are. And in English, we say, read between the lines. In Chinese, we say 察言观色. You really need to look at the facial expression, how that person say. Because what they say, if it does not match their facial expression, it means they are lying or they're being kind of reluctant telling you something, right? So all that is really important. Yeah. Being a good observer, I think that's another key important skill.
Absolutely. That is the alignment really is where you'll find a lot of great information or the misalignment or the disconnection between what somebody is saying, how they're saying it, the tone, the volume, the inflection, the pacing, and then how they look when they are saying it. You can kind of pick up on a lot of cues between the alignment or misalignment of those three areas. And a good exercise, if someone that's listening to this says, I'm really not that observant when I'm communicating with people. A couple of things that I've recommended is one, either record yourself and then watch it back without the volume and just mute it so you can kind of look at the expressions that you're doing. Then also watch it back with the volume, but don't look at the video. So you can start to get a sense of what was the tone or the intentionality behind the way you're communicating, or just simply watch other people communicate. If you watch a video of somebody communicating without the volume, you should jot down some notes. What do you think their feeling or their emotions or their sentiments were during this time? Then watch it back and see, was I on point? Same thing. Listen to the volume, don't watch the visual, and get an idea. How would I think that this person is looking as they're doing their communications? It's a great way to kind of help build that observational muscle up.
I love that. I think that's super cool. I think another way, we all love, good movies, right? And usually good movie, why make it real is because of the actors and actress. They can just, present emotion and how to communicate or not communicate sometimes through their facial expression in such a lovely way. So one of the easy things to pick up and observe and decide whether that's a good acting or bad acting in relation to the communication is just by watching the film. That's my just little tip because I love doing that to myself.
I'm a huge movie buff, so I'm going to definitely take that into account next time I'm watching a movie. So, okay, does that really, are they really conveying that emotion through their facial gestures and the things that they're doing? And yes, some actors and actresses are much better at it than others. Catherine, as you think about your career and the success that you've had, if I were to ask someone close to you and say, what was the key communication skill that really has helped Catherine get to this point? What might they share with me?
Well, in my case, it has to be intercultural communicative competence. So that means the ability to communicate across cultural boundaries. As you know, it's not the same, as an international student, in order to be a good student or land a job or then be able to use not my native language, but educate a group of students to learn my language. I think the intercultural communicative competence is really, really important. So that involves, of course, what we've discussed, the openness to learn, to listen, to understand my needs, my students' needs, or my colleagues' needs. But also at the same time is, I would say, life learning element is part of that intercultural communicative competence because this is not something you necessarily develop overnight. Even though I've been living in the UK for so long, I'm still learning because every time with interaction, whether it's successful or unsuccessful, if it's successful, it validates, okay, you are communicating effectively in this context, you're doing the right thing. So it gives you confidence to go into another interaction and do it better. And even if sometimes there's misunderstanding, it does happen, right? It still happens. But you can see it as a learning opportunity. So you learn something new. And then you can, develop and change your behavior for the next time. I give you a silly example. One thing quite different cross-culturally is that if in China, if you take friends out for dinner, or maybe you invite them to come to your house and you're the guest, you would not clear your plate to show appreciation. What you do is you if you want to be polite, you will always, keep some food in the plate and you will of course compliment on the food and just say, oh, you're so generous, you prepare so much, right? So I'm really, really full. That's how you show, politeness. Well, in the UK, apparently to clear your plate, right, it's the polite way to say to the host you really enjoyed it. So you can see, even though we all want to express our politeness as guests in the same way, but the way we do it is very different. And the other thing is about, in a similar situation, like a Chinese host could come across as very imposing because the language they use in this kind of situation, they will say, oh, eat, 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 drink, 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 like very use a lot of imperatives, like do it. But they want to show their sincerity, right? By kind of using that kind of language. I don't think it's gonna go very well in the context of UK. Usually people will say, please help yourself, right? And be my guest, but not like keeping, kind of
Right.
forcing the guests to eat or drink. So that's another kind of cultural differences. So I think by living abroad, living in the UK for such a long time, I still observe this kind of differences. And I think what makes it interesting from my perspective, I feel I'm learning, but I think you can see, even though different cultural or language express differently, but there's a lot in common. Ultimately, it's about humanity. You want to build friendship, we want to have a harmonious and successful relationship. All that at the end come together. It's just that little differences. But in a way, I think that makes our world more interesting as well.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah, I think gosh, if I had gone to China, I would definitely offend a lot of people because I'm a member of the Clean Plate Club, so that I'll have to remember that if I go there, leave a little bit. No, that's so interesting to hear. And I just, for my role traveling a good bit to different parts of the world, one of the things that I do when I'm going to somewhere, last year I spent a good bit of time in the Middle East for work. So just
Mm.
starting to research, different parts of the culture, the way people communicate and interact and greetings and all these different nuances of understanding. And There's a old expression from a movie. We were talking about movies. Glengarry Glen Ross. It's a sales movie. ABC, always be closing. It's this idea of ABL, always be learning. Every single interaction that you have with someone, whether it is a professional interaction or you're simply out to dinner, you can learn from that. Maybe what not to do, but what to do. If you meet somebody at a grocery store and you come away from that interaction, you're like, oh man, I feel good. They just made me feel really good talking to them. Reflect on that. What was it maybe that they were doing? The types of questions, simply the way that they smiled or engaged with you, that you can pick up something little. And those little things that you learn throughout your daily interactions have a compounding impact on your communication skills. And ultimately, I think your career success and your personal success and your personal relationships continue to hone those skills, pick up little things, and you will see the results from it.
Definitely. And I like your background, just see be nice to people.
Yes. Work hard and be
Yeah.
nice to people.
That's really cool. And I think that's a big part of what we try to achieve through our communication, right? It is part of, be nice to people, but be nice to people in the way that they want to be nice to.
Absolutely. Catherine, who is someone from throughout your career that has had an impact on your communication style? Maybe you observe them, whether it's somebody that you worked with, someone from your personal life, just a public figure. Maybe you picked something up from them and you've tweaked it and made it your own.
I've been fortunate. I had two former bosses that I worked very well, and but they're very different, like in terms of the way they communicate. One is kind of very he's British, but we often joke about it because he's not very kind of reserved or stereotypical type of British. He's actually very, very expressive and very kind of charismatic. So especially in terms of giving speech in public and at different events. So I thought, oh, that's cool. This person can really create this very positive and energetic atmosphere. So I thought that's quite interesting. I kind of observe and see how he does that. I think there's partly the personality, but partly also, it's quite interesting to observe how people start their speech with a lovely opening and also a lovely closing. I got that kind of echoing, feeling. I think you always want to start with something, make your audience feels good, but you also want to make sure you close with something, make your audience feel good. So that warmth and fun element at the beginning, at the end, I picked up from him. I thought that works very well. And then another boss I had, also British, but this time I think would be maybe more aligned with a stereotypical British. That means a little more reserved, a little more serious, but with the British humor. So a lot of, you know, kind of we say code jokes, or some kind of it's not something or sarcasm, but you need to pick it up somehow to understand and appreciate. And I thought that's also quite cool, even though he's not loud, he's not necessarily charismatic, but at the same time he conveyed his message really well in a very kind of calm, collective, but then there's jokes here and there. So I thought that's also interesting. I find that one's a little bit more hard to mimic, but I think,
Mhm.
by observing different people doing what they're good at, I think one thing I actually learned the most is to understand people are different. So it's not like one style necessarily work for that person would work for me. So ultimately, I think authenticity to find what I can resonate, what is more aligned with my own personality is the best way forward. So I don't know whether that answers your
Mhm.
question, but I think they all had a kind of impact on me, allow me to understand people can be so different, but at the same time be effective. And I kind of pinned it down to be your authentic self.
That's what I love so much about communication and the work that I do is that you can have people that communicate in two completely different styles, yet they are both very effective. And it comes down to what you said, authenticity. They are who they are. And to your point, it's not necessarily going out and watching people and trying to mimic, say, oh, I'm going to be like this person, or I'm going to go be like this person. Typically, that's not going to work out well because you are not going to be authentic. It's going to be exhausting. It's going to come off as disingenuous. But it might be taking little bits and pieces that you see. So, you know what? I like that. That really resonated with me. And you can start to incorporate how that might work with your particular communication style. And the other thing you hit on there that always baffles me when I see people present is how little effort most people put into their intro, into their closing. The
I
two
see.
things that people typically are going to remember the most, especially that intro, because it sets the stage for the entire presentation or communication. And then the closing, the call to action. What do you want them to think, do, remember, do differently? They're usually, okay, well, we're going to get started on, and then they get going. And then at the end, thank you. And then that's it. Right. So
Yeah.
they miss two massive opportunities to impact the effectiveness of their communication. Catherine, as we're wrapping up here, what piece of closing advice would you have for folks listening to this? It's really around the importance of the skills that we talked about today and the impact that they can have in their lives.
Mm, I think, I'm pretty sure a lot of audience, who follow you who are really great communicator. I think one thing I'm more thinking about in the future, in the age of AI, particularly, I'm thinking more from my own experience. I would really want to talk about the importance of learning language and learning communication about another culture. So obviously, English is still lingua franca. It's very, very important. And also in the age of rising of AI, a lot of people feel there's no need to make more effort to learn foreign languages. And I would really say, learning another language, learning how other people think is beyond just grammar and the vocabulary, because every time you spend time and effort to learn a new language, it really opens doors because it allows you to think differently, because our communication, our language, and our culture are so intertwined. So if you spend a little bit of effort, if you really want to be a global citizen, so try to embrace differences, and learning a foreign language, would allow you to do that in very unexpected manner. And by doing so, you will also improve your communication styles and communication skills, because by learning a foreign language, you really develop your empathy, your open-mindedness, your ability to interact, your ability to listen. There's so many different subtle skills required in order to be able to communicate in a language that is not your own. And I think that will really allow you to not only be a good communicator in your own language, but make more, build more relationship and build more friendship across different cultural boundaries.
That is fantastic advice, Catherine. Thank you so much for sharing that. And if people want to get in touch with you, learn a little bit more about the work that you do, what's the best way for them to do that? And I'll be sure to include it in the show notes.
Sure. I'm a relatively active LinkedIn user, so people can get in touch via LinkedIn, and that's always a nice way to get to know also from a professional perspective other people what they're doing. Yeah, and thank you so much for having me. I really enjoy our talk, and I think it's a great show, and I love how structure the question, from a very personal story journey, but lead to, more practical advice that we talked about together. And I hope this is useful for all your audience today. And thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for joining me and sharing your expertise. Really do appreciate it. I know I learned something from it. I'm sure the audience is going to find it very beneficial as well. So, Catherine, thank you so much. Hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Special thanks again to my guest, Dr. Hua Xiang, for joining us and sharing such thoughtful insights on intercultural communication, rapport building, and the power of language. As we close, here's a reminder inspired by Catherine's message. Great communicators do more than deliver clear messages. They build relationships, they stay curious about the person in front of them, and in a global world, They do the work to understand how culture shapes meaning, expectations, and even politeness. Communication becomes more effective when we learn to observe, adapt, and stay open-minded, especially across differences. Be sure to subscribe to Communicast so you don't miss future episodes with leaders, educators, and experts redefining what great communication looks like. And if this episode resonated with you, please leave a rating or review. It helps others discover the show and supports our growing community. Thanks for listening, and have a great day.